palace of the Zalarian Empire stretched like a crown over the shining city, its towers glimmering in pale violet light. Streams of hovering vehicles glided smoothly between the spires, and guards in polished exosuits patrolled every avenue. The Empire was a place of order, pride, and unmatched power. Every citizen knew their place, and every warrior knew their duty. In the heart of this empire lived Princess Lyra. She was young, bright and confident, with silver blue eyes that seemed to hold both mischief and authority. She had grown hearing tales of other civilizations, especially humans, whose warriors were said to be legendary despite their primitive technology. To Lyra, these stories were amusing exaggerations. After all, the Zalarians had mastered space travel, energy weapons, and the art of combat itself. How could mere humans, limited and fragile, ever pose a challenge? Yet whispers of a human fighter, Captain Marcus Kane, had begun to circulate in the Empire. According to reports, this human had defeated small Zalarian squads during skirmishes on remote colonies, without advanced weapons and without leaving any trace of destruction. His reputation grew like wildfire in hushed conversations across Zalarian ships and outposts. Lyra sat on her throne in the council hall, legs crossed, listening to her advisors debate the matter. Her silver robes glimmered under the high lights of the chamber. Humans? Defeating our squads? Really? She asked, her voice melodic yet edged with disbelief. Yes, Princess, one of the advisors replied, bowing low. Reports confirm it. Our squads were defeated without major casualties, but they failed their objectives. The humans' tactics were ... unusual, precise, unpredictable. Lyra laughed, a soft musical sound that echoed through the hall. Unpredictable? Do you expect me to believe that a human could outthink trained Zalarian soldiers? They are small, weak, and slow. Her laughter filled the chamber. Most of the advisors smiled nervously. Perhaps it is a myth, another advisor suggested carefully, trying to temper her amusement. Humans are known for exaggerated stories. Some claim their warriors can survive conditions no other species can, or that they possess extraordinary reflexes. Lyra leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. Extraordinary reflexes? Survival skills. Do any of these myths come with proof? Show me one human fighter, and I may reconsider. Her words were sharp, almost like a challenge. But beneath her confidence, a spark of curiosity lit in her mind. What if the stories were true? The thought both excited and unsettled her. She had lived her entire life believing in the supremacy of her people. To doubt it, even for a moment, was thrilling. Meanwhile, far from the Empire, Captain Marcus Kane adjusted the controls of his small diplomatic vessel. His ship was sleek, unassuming, a human design that relied more on ingenuity than raw power. Marcus had heard rumors of the Zalarian Empire, a species proud, advanced, and feared by many civilizations. Yet here he was, flying quietly toward their territory. Aware that curiosity could be as dangerous as weapons, Marcus was not the type to fight for glory. He preferred intelligence, strategy, and observation over brute force. And if the stories of his past victories had spread across the galaxy, he knew that Zalarians would certainly want to see for themselves. He was ready, though. Humans had a history of surviving impossible odds. That was their strength. Back in the palace, Lyra decided to act. She summoned her scouts, the elite watchers of her empire. Find him, she commanded, her tone leaving no room for doubt. Bring this human before my eyes. Let me see if the stories are true. The scouts, sleek in their silver armor and equipped with advanced tracking technology, nodded and vanished into the violet mist outside. Lyra's laughter faded into thoughtful silence as she rose from her throne and walked along the balcony overlooking the city. The buildings sparkled like a field of stars, and the river of light that flowed through the streets reminded her of the pride of her empire. But for the first time, she wondered, could a human truly match her people? Days passed. Marcus's ship approached the outer edge of the Zalarian Empire undetected. He had carefully avoided patrols, relying on stealth and navigation systems that were as much human ingenuity as technology. On board, his small crew worked efficiently, checking protocols and preparing for first contact. Marcus, however, remained calm. He had faced challenges before. The Zalarians were unknown, yes, but humans thrived on the unknown. Meanwhile, in the palace, Lyra's anticipation grew. She spent hours in the council hall, watching data streams from scouts and satellites. The more reports she saw, the less certain she felt. The humans seemed clever, resourceful, oddly composed traits that even the best Zalarian warriors sometimes lacked. Finally, the scouts returned. One of them, a young warrior named Vera, bowed deeply before Lyra. "Princess, the human is nearby. His vessel has entered orbit. He is requesting diplomatic contact." Lyra's heart skipped. She had expected a clumsy, weak human, not someone who could navigate Zalarian space without detection. "Very well," she said, a small smile playing at her lips. "Bring him to the palace. Let me see if these myths have any truth." That evening, as the twin suns set over the empire, casting long violet shadows across the palace walls, Marcus's ship hovered above the central plaza. The palace loomed below, a structure of elegance, order, and silent power. He knew that the next few hours could change perceptions, human and Zalarian alike. Lyra watched from the balcony, her eyes narrowing. A mixture of excitement and doubt swirled inside her. She had laughed at the stories for years. She had mocked the idea that a human could challenge her people. Yet now, as she prepared to meet Marcus Kane, she felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, curiosity, and perhaps a hint of fear. Marcus descended gracefully into the landing zone. His posture calm, his expression unreadable. He stepped out of his vessel, and for a moment, the air seemed to hold its breath. The palace guards tensed, unsure how to react to a human in their sacred space. Lyra's eyes studied him carefully. He was human, fragile, unarmored, and seemingly ordinary. Yet there was an aura of confidence and quiet strength about him that made her pause. "Welcome," she said, her voice smooth and steady. "I am Princess Lyra of the Zalarian Empire. You are the human called Marcus Kane?" Marcus inclined his head slightly. "Yes, Princess Lyra. It is an honor to meet you and your people." Lyra smiled faintly, though her eyes betrayed a mixture of amusement and curiosity. "I have heard many stories of your skills. Some say humans like you have defeated our squads without even touching a weapon. Is that true?" Marcus's lips curved into a small, confident smile. "I prefer to think that humans survive by thinking, Princess. Strength alone rarely wins the day." Lyra's laughter returned, soft but tinged with intrigue. "We shall see, Captain Kane. We shall see." Lyra had laughed at the myths of human fighters for years. Now, one stood before her eyes. And for the first time, she wondered if her laughter had been premature. The scouts had reported accuracy. The palace was ready, and the city watched in quiet anticipation. A human had arrived in the heart of the Zalarian Empire. And a princess, proud and confident, faced the first real question of her life. Could humans truly be more than stories? As night fell over the glowing city, Lyra prepared herself. She would test him, not with weapons or strength, but with intellect, agility, and cunning. She wanted to know if humans were truly as remarkable as the tales suggested. The next morning, the sun rose over the Zalarian palace in streaks of violet and gold. The city below shimmered like a field of crystals, with gliding vehicles reflecting the light in intricate patterns. Princess Lyra stood on her balcony, her robes flowing in the gentle morning breeze, watching Marcus Kane's ship. It was docked in the central plaza, sleek and unassuming among the grandeur of the palace towers. Lyra's mind was racing. The human had arrived without weapons, without an army, yet here he was, walking freely in her city. She had laughed at human myths for years, dismissing them as exaggerations. Yet now, a real human stood in her empire, and something inside her whispered that perhaps the stories were true. She descended the grand staircase to the council hall, her advisors following silently behind her. "Prepare the challenges," she commanded. "I want to see what this human is capable of. If he is truly remarkable, he will rise to the occasion." Her advisors exchanged nervous glances. The tests had never been designed for a human before. They were meant to challenge Zalarian elites, creatures of superior strength, reflexes, and intelligence. How a human would survive them was unknown. Meanwhile, Marcus Kane moved through the palace corridors with quiet confidence. His eyes were sharp, scanning every detail. The shimmering walls, the intricate carvings, the silent guards. He knew that observation could be as valuable as strength. Humans had survived across the galaxy not because of their size or power, but because they could think, adapt, and predict. He entered the main hall, where Lyra awaited him, seated upon her throne. Her silver-blue eyes locked on his, assessing, questioning. "Captain Kane," she said, her voice calm yet commanding. "I have arranged challenges to test your abilities. You may pass or fail, but do not think I will treat you lightly. These tests were designed for Zalarian warriors, not humans." Marcus inclined his head. "I understand, Princess Lyra. I am ready." Lyra stood, and her presence filled the room. She was elegant, powerful, and proud, every movement calculated, every gesture perfect. "Then let us begin." The first challenge took place in the palace gardens, a vast expanse of flowering plants, reflective pools, and walkways suspended above glowing streams. A series of obstacles had been set up: narrow beams over water, floating platforms, and suspended rings of energy that glimmered like light itself. "Your first task," Lyra explained, "is agility. Cross the course without touching the ground, without breaking any barrier. Any failure will mark your performance." Marcus studied the course. The platforms moved unpredictably. The energy rings shifted in timing, and one misstep could trigger alarms. He smiled faintly. Humans had faced impossible obstacles before. This was no different. He started. Step by careful step, he moved across the beams, his balance precise. When a platform tilted, he adjusted instinctively. When an energy ring shimmered closer, he ducked and rolled, using momentum to carry him forward. Each move was calculated, yet fluid, as if he could anticipate the rhythm of the course. Lyra watched, her amusement slowly turning to curiosity. Most Solarians would have completed the course with brute speed, relying on strength and reflex. Marcus relied on observation, timing, and ingenuity. His method was different, unpredictable, and surprisingly effective. By the end of the course, Marcus had completed every obstacle without triggering a single alarm. Lyra's lips curved into a small, impressed smile. "Interesting," she murmured. "You rely on observation, not strength. I must admit, I did not expect this." The next challenge tested intellect. In the palace's grand library, enormous holographic puzzles floated in the air. Each puzzle represented a scenario requiring strategy: rerouting energy flows to prevent an overload, decoding alien symbols to unlock doors, navigating simulated security systems. Lyra watched Marcus as he approached the first puzzle. He did not panic. Instead, he paused, studied the patterns, and tried different approaches. When one solution failed, he quickly adapted, analyzing the error and testing alternatives. The Zalarian advisors whispered among themselves, astonished at his calm and methodical approach. "This is not human behavior," one muttered. Marcus completed the puzzles faster than anyone had expected. He didn't rely on brute memory or raw computational power. He relied on reasoning, deduction, and adaptability. Each puzzle that fell before him added to Lyra's growing respect and her quiet tension. The third test took place in the observation deck, overlooking the city. Lyra had prepared a scenario: simulated crises appearing across the metropolis, requiring quick decisions to prevent damage and confusion. Guards and holographic citizens moved about the city, and the human would need to respond efficiently. Marcus analyzed the situation, prioritizing tasks and delegating to the few Zalarian assistants present. He directed them calmly, anticipating challenges before they arose, and solving problems through innovative thinking rather than force. Within minutes, the simulated crises were resolved with precision. Lyra felt a twinge of disbelief. "This human, he thinks differently," she whispered to herself. "Not faster, not stronger, but smarter." The final test was unannounced. Lyra had decided to gauge Marcus's intuition and emotional intelligence. She presented a series of scenarios where the choices were not right or wrong, but morally complex. A citizen needed help, but following protocol would delay aid to another. A security breach required quick judgment without complete information. Marcus faced each scenario thoughtfully, considering not just efficiency, but the value of life, fairness, and consequence. His decisions reflected compassion and clever reasoning, traits rare in Zalarian warriors, often prioritized orders and protocol over empathy. Lyra's amusement was gone. In its place was fascination, tinged with something she did not expect: admiration. For the first time, she saw humans not as inferior, but as capable of extraordinary feats that did not rely on physical power. By the end of the day, Marcus had completed all challenges. He had crossed the agility course, solved the puzzles, managed the city simulation, and navigated moral dilemmas, all with calm, confidence, and intelligence. Lyra stood before him, her eyes reflecting both pride and uncertainty. "You have exceeded my expectations," she said quietly. "I laughed at the stories of human fighters, Captain Kane. But you have proven that my laughter was misplaced." Marcus inclined his head. "Thank you, Princess Lyra. I only act as humans always have, with thought, adaptation, and cooperation. Strength is not always the answer." Lyra studied him, her mind racing. She had dismissed humans for years, believing in her empire's superiority. Yet here was one human who had outshined her best. Warriors without a single display of violence. The palace guards whispered among themselves, exchanging looks of astonishment. Wordlessly, they began to realize that this human was no ordinary visitor. He had arrived not to conquer or destroy, but to show the power of the mind. The ingenuity of a species they had underestimated. Lyra walked around Marcus, observing him closely. "Your methods are unconventional," she said. "You do not fight like us. You do not think like us. Yet, you succeed." Marcus smiled faintly. "Humans succeed because we are adaptable, Princess. We learn quickly, observe carefully, and solve problems creatively. We do not rely on raw power alone." Lyra nodded slowly, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. She realized that the human before her was a puzzle unlike any she had encountered. She wanted to understand him, to see the limits of his abilities, and perhaps to learn from him. As evening approached, the palace glowed under the twin suns, casting long shadows across the gardens and towers. Marcus was escorted to a guest chamber, where he would rest before further testing the next day. Lyra remained in the council hall, reviewing the reports and observations from the day's challenges. A quiet smile touched her lips. The human had arrived unarmed, unassuming, and yet he had captivated the princess, her advisors, and even her guards. His brilliance lay not in fighting or weapons, but in thinking, adapting, and acting with courage and intelligence. Lyra leaned back in her chair, her mind alive with questions. Could a species so fragile, so underestimated, truly be more than the myths suggested? Could humans, with no power but their mind and spirit, change the way her empire viewed the galaxy? For the first time, the princess felt something she had never experienced before: genuine curiosity. And perhaps the first glimmer of respect for a human. The next day promised new challenges, more tests, and deeper understanding. Marcus Kane had survived the first day, not through strength, but through ingenuity. Lyra now knew that the myths had substance, and she could no longer dismiss them. As night fell over the palace, the city below twinkled like a sea of stars. Lyra gazed out over her empire, thinking of the humans she had met. The myths were true, at least in part, and she felt a thrill of anticipation. Tomorrow, the real journey would begin. The morning sun spilled golden light over the Zalarian palace, reflecting off towers, gardens, and crystal walkways. Princess Lyra stood in her private chamber, her robes flowing around her. Today, she would observe Marcus Kane in ways she had not before. The previous day's challenges had revealed his intelligence, agility, and problem-solving abilities. But Lyra wanted more. She wanted to understand how humans thought, how they reacted under pressure, and how they made choices that Zalarians rarely considered. Marcus had been summoned to the palace's observation hall, a vast room with windows stretching from floor to ceiling, overlooking the city and beyond. The hall was equipped with holographic projectors, advanced simulations, and environmental controls. Lyra had arranged a scenario that would test him in ways more subtle than agility or puzzles, a simulation that required leadership, judgment, and quick thinking. Lyra entered the hall, her presence commanding attention. The Zealarian advisors followed silently, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Marcus waited calmly, studying the room. Aware that the challenge would test more than just skill, Captain Kane, Lyra said, her voice steady. Today you will face a realistic scenario. We have prepared a simulated crisis in the city. Your task is to respond, coordinate, and resolve the situation. No physical combat is required. Your success will be measured by efficiency, judgment, and the preservation of life. Marcus nodded. Understood, Princess. I am ready. Lyra activated the simulation. Holographic images of the city appeared, displaying streets, vehicles, and citizens going about their daily routines. Suddenly, alerts flashed across the display. A series of environmental hazards had been triggered. Energy surges threatened the power grid. Transportation systems began to fail. And a critical communication hub was at risk of collapse. Most Azelians would react instinctively, issuing orders, activating security drones, and relying on brute force to stabilize the situation. Marcus, however, observed quietly, taking in all the information. He analyzed the patterns of failure, prioritized the most urgent problems, and began issuing precise instructions to the Zalarian assistants who were part of the simulation. Reroute power from non-critical sectors to stabilize the grid, he instructed calmly. Redirect transport drones to assist stranded citizens. Communication systems can be temporarily suspended in low-priority areas to protect core infrastructure. Lyra watched closely, fascinated. The human did not panic, nor did he rely on overwhelming force. He adapted to the challenges, balancing efficiency and caution. Every decision reflected thoughtfulness, foresight, and empathy qualities Zalarians often overlooked in their pursuit of perfection and control. As the simulation progressed, unexpected complications arose. A minor error in the energy grid caused cascading failures, threatening a densely populated area. Marcus quickly reassessed the situation, delegating tasks and improvising solutions. He coordinated evacuations, rerouted power, and even devised a temporary containment measure using existing technology. Lyra could not hide her amazement. "He is remarkable," she whispered. Her advisors, usually quick to critique, were silent, their eyes wide with respect. The human had transformed a simulated crisis into a demonstration of intelligence, leadership, and moral judgment. The simulation ended successfully. Marcus had resolved the crisis efficiently, minimized risk, and ensured the safety of all citizens. Lyra approached him, curiosity and admiration evident in her eyes. "You handled that situation better than most Solarians would," she said. "Your methods are unconventional, yet effective. You do not rely on strength or dominance. Instead, you observe, analyze, and adapt. How do humans develop this skill?" Marcus smiled faintly. "We learn through experience, Princess. We face challenges with limited resources and must find creative solutions. We rely on observation, teamwork, and empathy. Strength alone rarely solves complex problems." Lyra considered his words. Her people valued order, power, and precision. They rarely paused to consider the human perspective, to think about consequences, empathy, or moral balance. Yet here was a human who had managed a crisis with both intelligence and care. "You think differently than we do," she said. "You consider outcomes, consequences, and emotions. Most Solarians would focus on control, efficiency, and authority alone." Marcus nodded. "Yes, humans value adaptability and collaboration. We understand that no one can solve everything alone. We learn from mistakes, from observation, and from one another. Strength is useful, but thought, empathy, and cooperation are more powerful. Lyra felt a subtle shift inside her. The admiration she had felt yesterday was growing into respect. For the first time, she realized that humans might possess qualities her empire had never fully appreciated. Intelligence, adaptability, and moral judgment. These were weapons of a different kind, far more dangerous than brute strength. To test him further, Lyra arranged another scenario, this time outside the simulation. A controlled real-world environment in the palace gardens presented unexpected problems. A small mechanical failure triggered a cascading series of complications. Suspended platforms shook, holographic barriers flickered, and automated drones malfunctioned. Marcus assessed the situation quickly. He observed the malfunctioning drones, calculated trajectories, used the surrounding structures to stabilize the platforms. He communicated with palace assistants calmly, directing them to assist without panic. Within moments, the crisis was resolved. Lyra's eyes widened. The human had solved a real-time problem under pressure, using intellect and collaboration rather than force. The subtlety of his approach amazed her. Unlike Zalarians, who often relied on overwhelming control, Marcus used adaptability and observation to turn a chaotic situation into order. Afterward, Lyra walked beside him through the palace gardens. Flowers glimmered in the sunlight, and gentle streams reflected the colors of the sky. The human moved with quiet confidence, unhurried, yet fully aware of his surroundings. "You are unlike any human I have imagined," Lyra said. "I laughed at the myths, believing them exaggerated. Yet you embody them all. Observation, adaptation, intelligence, even morality. How is it that your species can thrive despite weakness and strength?" Marcus considered her question. "Humans survive because we work together, learn from challenges, and innovate. We do not rely on force alone. We value understanding, empathy, and creativity. Strength is only one tool among many. Thinking and cooperation are often stronger than power." Lyra nodded slowly. She realized that the human had taught her a lesson she had never expected. Her empire measured value in strength, skill, and precision. Yet here was a being who succeeded without weapons, without power, without domination. His tools were intelligence, empathy, courage, a combination Zalarians rarely used in tandem. She paused beside a reflective pool. The water mirrored the sky in the palace towers, calm and clear. "You make me wonder," she said softly. "Perhaps we have underestimated humans for too long. Perhaps the myths are not exaggerations, but warnings. A single human can change perceptions, challenge assumptions, and inspire respect." Marcus smiled faintly. "Humans often succeed by adapting to the unexpected, Princess. We use what we have, learn from what we see, and act when necessary. You cannot predict every outcome, but you can respond wisely. That is what humans do." Lyra studied him closely. For the first time, she felt something unfamiliar. Humility tempered with awe. Her pride as a princess conflicted with her growing respect for the human. She had dismissed humans for years, and now one stood before her, showing qualities that even the best Zalarians rarely demonstrated. "You have taught me something today." "Captain Kane," she said quietly. "Not just about humans, but about judgment, perception, and the value of intelligence beyond strength. I underestimated your kind, and I admit it." "Acknowledgement is a start, Princess. Humans do not seek conflict unnecessarily, but we act when needed. Understanding each other is the first step toward respect." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting violet and gold across the palace, Lyra returned to her chambers, her mind alive with reflection. Marcus Kane had faced every challenge, both simulated and real, with intelligence, composure, and care. He had turned tests designed to mock him into demonstrations of skill and insight. For the first time, she wondered, could humans truly surpass her people in ways the Zalarians could not comprehend? Could a species so fragile in body but rich in mind and heart challenge an empire built on strength and control? The night was quiet, but Lyra's thoughts were anything but. She realized that her laughter at human myths had been premature. One human had arrived, and already he had begun to change her perception, and perhaps the perception of the entire empire. Marcus, in his guest chamber, reviewed the day in his mind. The human's approach of observation, adaptation, and empathy had succeeded once again. He had survived scrutiny, tests, and challenges, not through violence, but through thought. And he knew that the next day would bring new tests, new opportunities, and perhaps deeper lessons for the princess and her people. The palace slept under the starlit sky, unaware that its princess had begun to see the galaxy in a new way. Marcus Kane, a human fighter of myths, had arrived, and he had already started teaching a lesson in humanity. The morning light over the Zalarian palace shimmered in streaks of violet and gold, reflecting off crystal towers and gliding vehicles that moved like rivers through the sky. Princess Lyra watched the city below from her balcony, her expression calm but alert. Today, she would observe Marcus Kane in a situation unlike any previous challenge. Yesterday's simulations had revealed his intelligence, adaptability, and empathy. But today, the stakes would be real. Lyra had prepared a controlled crisis within the palace grounds. An automated energy conduit designed to demonstrate power regulation would intentionally malfunction. Simultaneously, a section of the palace garden's floating walkways would experience minor instability. The test was designed not to harm anyone, but to measure Marcus's response to unpredictable challenges in real time. Marcus arrived at the observation hall as usual, calm and composed. He had quickly learned the palace's systems, its rhythms, and even the personality of the princess who studied him so closely. Today he knew would be a test not of puzzles or agility, but of strategy, leadership, and moral judgment. Lyra entered the hall, her robes flowing behind her. Her silver-blue eyes studied him intently. "Captain Kane," she said, "today the scenario is unscripted. We have created real challenges that require quick thinking and adaptability. Your goal is simple: maintain order, protect those involved, and resolve the crisis." Marcus nodded. "Understood, Princess Lyra. I am ready." The crisis began without warning. The energy conduit in the palace's power hub glowed a bright orange, signaling an imminent overload. Alarms blared softly, echoing through the gardens and hallways. At the same time, floating walkways in the palace gardens began to shift unexpectedly. Creating potential hazards for staff and visitors, Marcus scanned the situation calmly. Most Solarians, trained in protocol and efficiency, would have reacted with strict orders and a reliance on forceful intervention. Marcus did not panic. Instead, he assessed the situation, analyzing risks, available resources, and the potential consequences of each action, stabilized the energy conduit using secondary power sources. He instructed one of the assistants, his voice calm and steady, "Redirect personnel from non-essential areas to assist with monitoring. Ensure no civilians are in the immediate vicinity." As the palace assistants moved to follow his instructions, a small error occurred. A power reroute caused the automated floating walkways to tilt unexpectedly, threatening to unbalance anyone on them. Marcus acted instantly. He calculated the trajectory of the moving platforms and directed the palace staff to stabilize them using temporary energy anchors. Lyra watched, her eyes widening. He was not simply solving problems, he was anticipating them before they occurred. Each decision he made was precise, thoughtful, and effective. The assistants moved confidently under his direction, following his clear instructions, and within moments, the immediate hazards were controlled. Yet the challenge was far from over. The energy conduit began emitting sporadic pulses, creating subtle vibrations throughout the palace gardens. Marcus noticed that if left unchecked, these pulses could disrupt other systems. He quickly devised a plan. Using existing technology in the palace, he would redirect energy through secondary conduits to stabilize the main hub. Divert energy to auxiliary lines, Marcus instructed calmly. Monitor feedback loops carefully. If fluctuations occur, adjust output gradually rather than in large increments. Safety first. Lyra could not hide her amazement. The human was solving problems faster and more accurately than even her most skilled advisors could. And yet, he was doing so without aggression, without attempting to control through force. He was using thought, foresight, and cooperation. As the crisis continued, a minor communication failure emerged. Security systems reported multiple false alerts, creating confusion among the palace staff. Marcus quickly realized that relying on automated reports alone would slow response times. He instructed assistants to verify situations manually, prioritizing higher-risk areas and ensuring that no unnecessary panic spread. The palace's floating walkways stabilized. The energy conduit's pulses diminished, and the communication errors were corrected under Marcus's guidance. In less than an hour, the controlled crisis was fully resolved. Not a single individual was harmed, and the palace systems remained intact. Lyra approached him, her expression a mixture of awe and curiosity. "Captain Kane," she said quietly, "you have managed a real crisis with more skill and composure than I have seen in any Zalarian warrior. Your methods are unlike ours, yet highly effective. How is it that humans can act so decisively under pressure?" Marcus smiled faintly. "We rely on observation, adaptation, and cooperation, Princess. We understand that not all problems can be solved by force or protocol. Thinking ahead, anticipating outcomes, and working together often produces better results than power alone." Lyra nodded slowly, her mind racing. The human before her had proven what she had begun to suspect. Humans were capable of extraordinary feats, not because of physical strength, but because of intelligence, ingenuity, and moral judgment. She realized that her empire had underestimated humans for centuries. "Your approach. It is both precise and compassionate," she said softly. "Most Solarians would have acted aggressively, following protocol without question. You consider consequences, risks, and the well-being of others. That is a rare quality." Marcus inclined his head. "Humans value adaptability and collaboration. We understand that every action has an impact. We plan, observe, and adjust accordingly. Force is only one tool. Thought and empathy are far more powerful." The princess walked beside him through the palace gardens, her mind alive with reflection. Flowers shimmered in the sunlight, streams reflected the sky, and the gentle hum of the city created a peaceful rhythm. Yet Lyra could not ignore the shift inside her, a recognition that humans might possess qualities her people had never fully appreciated. "You have taught me something today, Captain Kane," she said quietly. "Not just about humans, but about judgment, perception, and the value of intelligence beyond strength. I underestimated your kind, and I admit it." Marcus smiled. "Acknowledgement is a start, Princess. Understanding is the first step. Humans do not seek conflict unnecessarily, but when necessary, we act with thought, care, and courage." As the day progressed, Lyra reflected on what she had witnessed. Marcus had managed a crisis with intelligence, empathy, and efficiency. He had anticipated problems before they arose, guided others with calm authority, and ensured the safety of all involved. His brilliance lay not in strength, but in strategy, judgment, and moral clarity traits Zalarians often overlooked. The palace staff, initially skeptical of the human, now regarded him with respect and admiration. Wordlessly, they recognized that he was not just a visitor or a myth brought to life, he was a teacher in the art of problem-solving, using skills their empire had rarely cultivated by evening. The twin suns had set, casting violet and gold across the palace gardens. Lyra stood on her balcony, looking out over the city with newfound contemplation. Marcus Kane had faced a real-world crisis and emerged successful. Not through dominance or aggression, but through intelligence, foresight, and human empathy, she realized, with a quiet thrill. That the myths she had laughed at were not exaggerations. A single human could challenge perceptions, inspire change, and reveal strengths her people had never valued. The lessons of humanity were unfolding before her eyes, lessons in courage, ingenuity, and morality. Marcus, back in his guest chamber, reviewed the events of the day. He had adapted, guided, and solved problems without force. Each success reinforced the human approach: observation, cooperation, and innovation. He knew that the princess and her empire were beginning to see the potential of humans in a new light. That night, as the palace slept under a starlit sky, Lyra pondered the future. The human had proven himself in real scenarios, not just simulations. He had shown that humans could think differently, act decisively, and inspire respect without resorting to violence for the first time. She considered the possibilities: could humans, with their intelligence and adaptability, influence the Zilarian Empire in ways her people had never imagined? Could one human spark a transformation in the way an entire civilization viewed the galaxy? Lyra smiled faintly. Marcus Kane had arrived as a myth, a legend, and now he stood as a living proof of human ingenuity. She understood that the real journey, the lessons, the insights, perhaps even alliances, was only beginning. The human had faced the turning point with calm, intelligence, and courage, and the princess, proud and curious, had begun to realize that the myths she once laughed at were true in ways she had never expected. The city below shimmered under the starlight, unaware that it had witnessed the beginning of a profound shift in perception. Marcus Kane had not only solved the crisis, but he had also begun to teach a lesson far greater than any simulation could convey: the true power of humanity. And somewhere in the quiet of the palace, both princess and humans sensed that the next challenges would be even more revealing. Tests that would uncover the full depth of human ingenuity, empathy, and courage. The turning point had arrived. The human had not only survived, but had excelled. And Princess Lyra, for the first time, truly understood why the myths of human fighters had endured across the morning sun bathed the Zilarian palace in soft violet light, reflecting off towers, gardens, and crystal walkways. Today was no ordinary day. Princess Lyra moved through the grand corridors with calm purpose, her silver blue eyes focused. Today, the human who had captured her curiosity, Marcus Kane, would be recognized not as a visitor, not as a myth, but as a being who had challenged every assumption she had about humans. The palace chambers had been prepared for a formal assembly. Zilarian nobles, advisors, and elite guards filled the vast hall, their expressions a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. The story of Marcus Kane had spread quickly, a human who had completed every test, resolved every challenge, and faced a real crisis with intelligence, empathy, and courage. Many were eager to see him for themselves. Lyra took her place on the elevated dais, regal and composed. Her robes shimmered in the soft morning light, and her presence commanded attention without effort. She had invited Marcus to join her in the ceremonial hall, not only to honor his achievements, but to demonstrate to her people that humans were far more capable than their myths suggested. Marcus entered the hall, calm and unassuming, yet fully aware of the weight of this moment. The assembled Zilarians watched closely. Some whispered among themselves, doubting the capacity of a human to merit such attention. Others looked on with cautious hope, curious to see if the stories were true. Lyra's gaze met his. She stepped forward, her voice echoing across the chamber. "Captain Marcus Kane," she began, "you have arrived in my empire as a myth, a legend whispered across our colonies. You have faced tests designed to challenge the finest of Zilarian warriors. You have navigated simulations, resolved crises, and demonstrated qualities that surpass mere strength or skill." Marcus bowed respectfully. "Thank you, Princess Lyra. I am honored to serve as a representative of my species." Lyra continued, her tone measured but full of admiration. "Your intelligence, ingenuity, and moral judgment have proven that humans possess strengths our empire has underestimated for centuries. You have shown us that adaptability, collaboration, and empathy can achieve what brute force cannot." A hush fell over the assembly. Many Zilarians had never heard such praise for a human. Some still doubted, but the evidence of Marcus Kane's actions was undeniable. He had faced challenges without violence, yet his results were flawless. Lyra turned to the gathered council and nobles. "Let it be known throughout the Zilarian Empire that the myths of human fighters are not mere stories. They are truths, embodied in Captain Marcus Kane. Let his example serve as a reminder that strength is not only measured by physical power or authority, but by intelligence, courage, and the wisdom to act rightly. A ripple of astonishment spread through the assembly. Whispers turned into murmurs of respect. The realization dawned that humans, once dismissed as weak and primitive, could teach lessons in problem-solving, morality, and ingenuity that even the mightiest Solarians had overlooked. Marcus straightened, meeting Lyra's gaze. "Princess Lyra," he said softly, "humans do not seek glory or recognition. We act to solve problems, to protect life, and to understand the world. Strength is only one tool. Observation, empathy, and cooperation are often stronger than force alone." Lyra nodded, acknowledging the wisdom in his words. For the first time, she felt a deep respect for humans, not as conquerors or warriors, as thinkers, problem-solvers, and moral beings. The myths she had once laughed at were no longer myths. They were reality, embodied in one human standing before her. The ceremony continued with the display of Marcus's achievements. Holographic recordings showed his completion of the agility course, his solutions to the complex puzzles, and his management of the real-world crisis within the palace gardens. Every detail highlighted human ingenuity and quick thinking. The audience watched, captivated, their doubts fading with every scene. Lyra stepped closer to Marcus, her expression serious but warm. "You have taught me something profound, Captain Kane, not just about your species, but about leadership, judgment, and the value of intelligence guided by empathy. I underestimated humans, and I acknowledge that mistake." Marcus inclined his head humbly. "Understanding and acknowledgement are the first steps toward respect, Princess. Humans value collaboration and learning. We hope to share knowledge, not dominate. We thrive when we observe, adapt, and work together." Lyra smiled faintly. She realized that Marcus's presence had already begun to change not just her view, potentially the perspective of the entire Zolarian Empire. His example had shown that humans could think differently, act wisely, and achieve outcomes beyond what strength or technology alone could accomplish. As the ceremony drew to a close, Lyra addressed the assembly one final time. "Let today mark a turning point. Let it remind us that intelligence, courage, and moral clarity can come from any species, no matter how underestimated. Captain Marcus Kane stands as proof of the greatness that humans can achieve, and a lesson to all of us in humility, respect, and understanding." A wave of applause filled the chamber. Some Zolarians clapped with disbelief, others with admiration, but all were changed. The myths of humans had been confirmed, and a single human had transformed the perception of an empire. After the ceremony, Lyra walked with Marcus through the palace gardens. The air fragrant with the scent of flowering plants and the gentle sound of flowing water, she looked at him thoughtfully. "You have not only proven your abilities, but have inspired change in my people. That is no small feat, Captain Kane." Marcus smiled. "I did not come to inspire Princess Lyra. I came to survive, to solve problems, and to represent humanity. If my actions encourage understanding and respect, then I am glad. Humans act best when we collaborate, learn, and adapt." Lyra nodded, a spark of admiration in her eyes. "You have shown me that true strength is not in weapons or dominance, but in intelligence, courage, and moral clarity. Humans possess qualities we often overlook, and you have reminded us to reconsider our assumptions." For the first time, the princess felt humility without shame, respect without doubt, and curiosity without fear. Marcus Kane had entered her empire as a myth, and he had emerged as a living example of what humans could achieve. His presence had shifted perspectives, challenged traditions, and inspired hope. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting violet and gold across the palace gardens. Lyra stood beside Marcus, gazing out at the city. The empire below shimmered in quiet anticipation, unaware that its understanding of humans had been forever changed. "You have shown me the power of humanity," Lyra said softly. "Not through violence or domination, but through thought, ingenuity, and courage. I will remember this lesson." Marcus inclined his head. Humans have always relied on observation, adaptability, and collaboration. We do not seek to dominate, but to understand. That is our strength. Lyra smiled faintly. Then perhaps the myths were never exaggerations. Perhaps they were warnings, reminders, and lessons, waiting for someone like you to prove them true. As night fell over the palace, the city below twinkled like a field of stars. Marcus had not only survived the challenges, but he had also transformed the perception of an entire civilization. The myths were no longer tales to amuse or frighten, they were reality, embodied in one human who had proven that intelligence, empathy, and courage could surpass power and technology. Lyra turned to Marcus, her expression calm but filled with admiration. The Empire will remember today, Captain Kane, and perhaps one day. Humans and Zalarians will learn from each other, sharing knowledge, respect, and understanding. You have shown us the way. Marcus smiled faintly, humbled yet confident. That is all any human could hope for, Princess Lyra, to be understood and to share what we have learned. The night air was cool and still, carrying the scent of flowers and the quiet hum of the city. The journey had begun with laughter at myths, moved through tests and challenges, and now ended with respect, recognition, and understanding. Princess Lyra had laughed at the myths of human fighters. Now, she looked at Marcus Kane standing beside her and knew the truth. Humans were extraordinary, not through strength alone, but through intelligence, courage, and moral clarity. One human had changed perceptions, challenged traditions, and inspired respect, and the galaxy, vast and full of mysteries, had just begun to learn what humans could truly achieve. The story of the human fighter had become legend, not of violence, but of intellect, courage, and humanity itself.